So, we're carrying on our short history of management in the 20th century. Part 2. Enter the Behaviourists. In Part 1, we saw how the Industrial Revolution had affected almost every part of people's lives. Where they lived, where they worked, even what they valued. People who had worked in the fields with nature as their timekeeper now found themselves working on the assembly lines of factories, working to the clock. Frederick Taylor, Henry Gantt, Frank Gilbreth, Elton Mayo, and Lillian Gilbreth, and many, many more, had all played a part in bringing about scientific management. But scientific management seems to have met a natural barrier. Worker relations are bringing things to a standstill. It seems that something new is needed. It was again around 1900 that a Russian academic professor named Ivan Pavlov formally studied the training of animals, dogs in particular, and discovered something that he called conditioning. Pavlov shows that dogs can be trained to obey a stimulus. If you give a dog food, its unconditioned response is to salivate, ready to eat the food. If you ring a bell, the unconditioned response of most dogs is nothing at all. But if you associate ringing the bell with bringing the food, the unconditioned response is still that the dog will salivate. After a while, you can ring the bell without the food, and the dog will still salivate, expecting food to come. This is known as a conditioned response. In the 1940s, an American called Berman Frederick Skinner showed much more complicated conditioning with pigeons, who learnt to obey different signs to allow different foods to be dispensed. And more importantly, he then worked with rats, who he considered to be as intelligent as young children. Skinner even tried to condition pigeons to pilot a guided missile bomb by pecking at target images during the Second World War. Unfortunately, the pigeons were killed when the bomb exploded. Both Pavlov and Skinner are showing that conditioning works best with rewards. The standard rewards of compensation, basic wages and salaries, variable pay in the form of bonuses, incentives, and stock options, benefits for health and medical insurance, life disability insurance, paid time off and holiday pay, paid retirement, changing the work-life balance, and for performance and talent management, performance reviews, goal setting, training, human relations development, career planning, succession planning, all are ways of improving the workplace. The lesson that Skinner applied to learning for sales and marketing activity is that with selling skills, if salespeople are rewarded for every sale they make, they are more likely to succeed. He then takes it a stage further. Incorporate rewards into the work tasks of the assembly line, and you should have a happy workforce. Some more enlightened employers decided what they wanted to achieve was job satisfaction in their workforce. Whoopee! Scientific management has hit a natural barrier, that of worker relations. It seems that something new is needed, but something new is here. Enter the behaviourists. And the barrier disappears. Part 2 of our story is the behaviourists. Following Berman Frederick Skinner, we have Dr. Abraham Maslow. In the early 1950s, Abraham Maslow developed the hierarchy of needs, which says that the natural human condition is to be dissatisfied. Because as we achieve one set of needs and wants to our satisfaction, we realize that another set of needs and wants are still dissatisfied. If scientific management is to work, we must also manage the differing perceptions of needs and wants that each individual employee sees as the current source of their dissatisfaction. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs starts with physiological needs, progresses to safety and security needs, to social needs, to self-esteem, and finally to what Maslow describes as self-actualization. Physiological needs are those that are concerned with straightforward survival, breathing, drinking, having food, and in the face of an enemy, deciding whether flight or fight is the appropriate response. Safety needs secure shelter, stored food, water supplies, and protection from the elements and also protection from enemies. When these needs are satisfied, we can move on to the social level. Social belonging, the safety that comes from numbers, family belonging. Self-esteem is when we know our place in the social group, knowing the pecking order, knowing on whom we can rely. And finally, self-actualization. Self-actualization is when the present efforts are focused on the future. Targets to be hit, projected outcomes to be achieved, making ambitions real. Scientific management was all about the organization, but now with Maslow, we need to balance the activities in the working environment between the individual, each individual, and the organization. The worker's needs and wants set in the working environment. The workplace environment has been created by scientific managers' work measurement and efficiency improvement techniques. It must now be described in behavioral terms. The next behaviorist is Douglas McGregor, who in the late 1950s and early 60s introduces the concept of organizational management styles and their effect on motivation. He describes Theory X and Theory Y. Most people are surprised when they read McGregor that he is not making a value judgment between Theory X and Theory Y styles of management. What McGregor says is that he is simply pointing out that they are different directions for management to manage, and that to work, they each must be consistently applied throughout the entire organization. Theory X says that people need close supervision. They will avoid work whenever possible. They will also avoid responsibility, that they only desire money, and that people must be pushed to perform. Theory Y, on the other hand, says that people want independence in work. People seek responsibility. People are self-motivated by self-fulfillment. People naturally want to work. People will drive themselves to perform. Not surprisingly, the audience sees Theory X management as authoritarian, repressive in style, tight in control, with no development, that produces limited and depressed culture. Whereas Theory Y is seen as liberating and developmental. Control, achievement, and continuous improvement achieved by enabling, empowering, and giving responsibility. Theory X is seen as the devil's style, whilst Theory Y is seen as the management of angels. And then Fred Herzberg arrives. Frederick Herzberg believes that most managers want to manage Theory Y. They want to be seen as managing angels by their workforce. But how can this be achieved? Herzberg's two factors of motivation become part of the answer. Herzberg divides the work-based factors into satisfiers. Winning them earns job satisfaction and contentment, and hygiene factors. These are expected in the workplace, just as good hygiene is expected in a hospital and taken for granted. When hygiene factors are missing, then dissatisfaction occurs. Herzberg's two factors divide up where time is spent improving hygiene factors with improved working conditions, better co-worker relations, improved supervision, better policies and rules, higher basic wage, improved salaries, better fringe benefits. All of these things sound good, and they will reduce job dissatisfaction, but will add nothing to the consequence of performance. Time spent improving satisfier factors with improved job satisfaction can lead to achievement of goals and targets, recognition of work well done, responsibility with achievement, control of the work itself, advancement in the organization, and personal growth. New and improved skills will all increase job satisfaction and will add much to effective performance. So Herzberg evolves the four-step cycle of motivation. achievement to be properly recognized, and for the worker to be made responsible for future achievement, which will lead to growth in the job, and the growth in the job will lead to new and improved achievement standards, and the cycle can start again. Try to incorporate the growth cycle into the work tasks, and you should get a happy workforce. Herzberg carries out much of his practical research at the case tractor assembly line, where it seems to work. Then along comes a man with a name that sounds like a high-powered racing car. Vroom! Victor Vroom. Vroom shortens the time cycles of Herzberg's model and adds a factor that he calls valence. This is the idea that even strongly motivated individuals are continuously evaluating the covalent risks. Is the reward I'm working towards still worth the effort that I'm putting in? Will I still get the reward when the task is completed? Does the risk to my security outweigh the value of the reward to me? Herzberg and Vroom are both creating self-motivated achievers through communication, perception, and now it includes personal cost-risk evaluation. Answering the question of Sir John Hunt, why do you climb mountains? I climb it because it's there. I climb it for the thrill of the risk. I climb it for the fame and the money. In all these theories, personal growth of the individual is the end goal. It may be growth of power and influence within the social group, esteem and position in the group, an increase in personal wealth, personal confidence and abilities, fame and a reputation beyond my social group, power and influence in society. Is there an organization where Theory X might be best? Sometimes an organization is valued because it is adding value to a predictable, uniform, and consistent process. Consistency is the main aim. The organization is process-driven. Each cycle reliably repeats and reliably adds value. Driven by standard operating procedures, SOPs. Theory X continues to be useful in the assembly line context. It needs experts from outside to effect change and improvement. Workers are chiefly valued for their experience of standard operating procedures. So how we have been told to do it is the best way. Every activity should have standard operating procedures to guide it. A value-adding process must be monitored, and if deviation is detected, then a time-critical reaction takes place, looking up or remembering the solution, The first solution you think of is best because the first is the quickest. Feedback deviation correction. Let it go past the monitoring point again, and hopefully the problem is solved. But some organizations are continuously trying to add value and achieve improvements in every aspect. Theory Y is probably better here. Value added step change. Every day, in every way, we get a little better. Theory Y equals productive improvement of the process. It's project driven. Maximum value added is achieved by the best option. This is rarely the first option we devise. It requires several alternatives to force a decision choice. Several potential solutions must be created and evaluated. Therefore, every individual becomes expert at their own bit of the activity and how it relates to other parts. They will all need project management skills and techniques to effect a value-added step change in their part of the project. How is this done? This is a project management environment. We must observe what is happening in the process in order to set a value-added objective. We then need a plan to achieve this, and the plan must contain what is to be done, where it is to be done, when it is to be done, and who is to do it. Why should it be done in that way? And we should create options so that each can be evaluated and we can decide which is the best method of working. We then must implement the improvement plans urgently so that the project does not change whilst the plan is being implemented, and then we control its implementation. Monitoring what is happening, measuring what is happening, and evaluating the effect. Modifying where necessary, correcting where necessary, and improvement method being implemented fully. Achieve the predicted step change, then continue value-added improvements with the next objective. In the 1970s, Peter Drucker harnesses the project management style with management by objectives. Starting the MBO process in an organization requires that we set the organization's objectives. These are then cascaded down as objectives to each employee. Each employee should have an individual set of objectives. We can then monitor the performance and evaluate the performance of these objectives and reward each employee accordingly. And this will start the cycle again. It is essentially an appraisal cycle. Unfortunately, Drucker's MBO can also be consolidated as a Theory X approach to management. Management says, "These are my objectives, so I am now relying on you to achieve these parts of my objectives, plus whatever you want for yourself." And the workforce says, "These are your objectives, which now appear to have become my objectives. and I won't have time to do anything for myself. Do as you're told, when you're told. Not exactly what Drucker had in mind. A new approach to MBO is led by John Adair. With his action-centered leadership model, essentially mapping the theory of small team leadership within the organization. Adair was a senior lecturer in leadership skills at the Army Staff College, Sandhurst, and trained the SAS in leadership and teamwork. Adair starts with the task. The leader must set the objectives, plan the activities, allocate responsibilities, and set standards. He must then work with each individual, coaching, counseling, developing, and motivating so that the individual can become an effective part of the team. The team needs communication, team building, discipline, and motivation. And Adair places the action center of leadership that balances all three segments as the work of the leader. Look for symptoms that suggest there is an imbalance in the way that the task and team and individual are interacting. By an overemphasis in one of the segments, you might lay too much emphasis on the task when productivity is needed, or perhaps too much emphasis on the team when they are complaining and dissatisfied, or maybe one individual is suffering from problems that require special attention. Whenever you're out of balance in one of these segments, the correction is found in the opposite segments. Restore the action center of leadership as quickly as practical. Supporting Adair comes Edward Charles Francis Publius de Bono from Malta, one of Malta's aristocratic and intellectual elites. He is a multi-expert who is encouraging lateral thinking in the industrial and business communities, another organizational manager, rather like McGregor. Lateral thinking depends on this kind of thinking. This is a cinema where I watch films. It's actually entertainment. This is also entertainment, and I prefer it. De Bono uses this as an example of the decline of Hollywood in the 50s. Lateral thinking starts with accurate functional definition. What a thing does, not what it is. Cinema and television both do entertainment. He also becomes a strong advocate of brainstorming as a group lateral thinking technique. Most managers give it a try with their teams, whether they understand it or not. Lateral thinking is presented as De Bono's secret to managing change. An interaction between individual values, group values, and society or community values, where change affects each one in turn. De Bono really is an expert. He's an MD in physiology, an MA in psychology, a PhD in medical science, a PhD in philosophy, a D.Des in design, and an MA in teaching. And as part of De Bono's academic disciplines in relation to the manager's role, he suggests that the common sense practice of empathizing with nonverbal communications linked to the chemical and emotional triggers in the body to become the new academic subject of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Tony Robbins of the UK and Richard Bandler and John Grinder of the USA all come to this conclusion. NLP provides models of human behavior to understand why certain people seem to be excellent at what they did, while others found the same tasks challenging or nearly impossible to do. Using NLP, I can model the more successful parts of my own behavior in order to reproduce in areas where I am less successful. Or I can model another person's effect, beliefs, and behavior changes that will improve their functioning and effectiveness. Perhaps shades of Orwellian motivation. The idea that an external event goes through various filters of conscious and unconscious thought that affect our internal representation, our physiology, and our state, which in turn creates behavior. The filters delete, generalize, and distort metaprograms, values, beliefs, decisions, and even memories. Complicated, this NLP, but it served well in some areas of vital negotiating. It gives some clues to very high-risk negotiating situations. All that I remember is that eyes going up to the left are likely to be looking for the lie. Professor Lawrence J. Peters is a hierarchologist from Canada who is best known for his formulation of the Peter Principle. In a hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to his level of incompetence. In time, every post tends to be occupied by an employee who is incompetent to carry out his duties. Work is accomplished by those employees who have not yet reached their level of incompetence. Another unintentional X-theory doom merchant. And just to make sure it's totally theory X, work always expands to fill the time available. Then in the 1990s, Michael Porter analyzes the theory of competition in business. He starts with an analytical tool called SWOT. List the strengths of your organization and balance those with the weaknesses. Look at the opportunities that the business is presented with outside, and look at the threats that also come from the environment. Scientific management started with organization and methods. The behaviorists then took it further. Then came objective management and competition theory. Meanwhile, we must go back to the 1940s. And that's going to be the next part of the story. What is happening in the 1940s that is significant? Well, the world goes to war. So what might Pearl Harbor cause to happen? That's the story of part 3. Goodbye for now.